There is a very big difference in science between the notion of precision and the notion of accuracy. So everything that's precise is accurate, but not everything that's accurate is precise. I'll give you an example. It's accurate to say that I'm between 5 feet and 7 feet tall. That's accurate. But it's not precise. It's precise to say I'm 6 feet 1.5 inches tall. So there's a big difference between precision and accuracy. So for instance, if I were to give you a map of the United States, and I were to draw a map which just gave you the contours of the country, and I put in 4 cities, San Francisco in the east, New York in the west, Chicago towards the north, and Houston towards the south, that would be an accurate map. What did I say? Sorry, San Francisco in the west, New York in the east. Okay. Thank you, Bob. So sometimes you're not even accurate or precise. Okay, let me redraw my map. San Francisco in the west, New York in the east, Chicago towards the north, Houston to the south, with the perimeter sketched in. That would be an accurate map of the United States, but not precise and totally useless to you. If you wanted to get, for instance, to Valentine, Nebraska, that map would be totally useless to you. So you need to know something else as well. No map is good unless you know where you are. If you have a GPS system that can't locate your present whereabouts, there's no point in plugging in a destination. It cannot get you to the destination. So no map is of use to you, no matter how precise it is and accurate it is, if you don't know where you are to begin with. If I just land you someplace in the middle of the United States and you want to get to San Francisco, and you plug it in, San Francisco, in your GPS system, but the GPS can't track where you are, it can't get you to where you want to be. So we have to look at maps which are not just accurate, but precise, and you have to know where you are in order for the map to be important. So I'm going to give you a very simple map. It's accurate, but it's very simple and not particularly useful to you. And then I'm going to go on and I'm going to attempt to draw a more precise one, starting with where I think you are. So for instance, I have a theory that the life trajectory, very simplistically, could be reduced to the following. Every single one of us starts out life innocent. We're innocent maybe for the first 10 or 11 years. We approach life with this extraordinary sense of awe and wonder at everything. We're amazed at turning stones and finding a beetle under the stone. And so we start off life totally innocent. And then somewhere in the early teenage years, this innocence bifurcates. And it goes into either naivete, which is age-inappropriate innocence. There's no point in being innocent at the age of 25, not knowing how the world works. I've told you many stories about my Aunt Rita, who's now in her 70s, the most naive creature God ever created. Totally naive, had no idea how to do life. She's a beautiful woman, she's got 3 kids and a few grandkids, but she has no idea what life is about. So there is naivete, which is age-inappropriate innocence. And then the second wing of it is idealism. So somewhere in our early teenage years, we have that opportunity to go towards naivete or to go towards idealism, in which we have a vision of ourselves, our world, and the future, and what we want to help to create. Somewhere, I believe, in our 30s, this idealism further bifurcates. And it either goes into cynicism or it goes into wisdom. And it happens a decision at a time, an event at a time, a relationship at a time. We either grow towards wisdom consciously and with awareness, or we grow towards cynicism and bitterness. So that would be a very, very simple map. And I would just add one other piece to that. It's the notion that all of human suffering lies in the gap between the ego and the soul. All human suffering lies in the gap, the tiny gap between the ego and the soul, between the identification with this CEO of waking consciousness and an identification with our core essence. So that might be a very, very simple map. It's accurate, but it's not particularly useful. What are you going to do with that map? How is that going to lead you forward in your journey into Christ consciousness? So instead of that, I want to try to create this morning a more precise map. And I'm going to do it in 4 stages. I'm going to talk firstly about the revolution of evolution. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about leadership. Then thirdly, about the road less traveled. And then I'm going to talk about training for Christ consciousness. So they're the 4 points I'll make this morning in an attempt to make a slightly more precise and a more useful map of the journey ahead. So the revolution of evolution. You can't have survived secondary school without having heard the phrase, especially if you studied biology, that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. They're just two big jawbreakers for ontogeny means the person's journey, the individual journey, and phylogeny from the Greek word phylogeny means just literally the tribe. And so the tribal journey or the journey of the species. So ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny merely means that every individual human being reenacts the entire journey of the species, the human species. So very, very simply, how would that look like? When you look at phylogeny, you're looking at the evolution of life on our planet over the last 3.7 billion years. And it started off just basically with single-celled creatures, bacteria and protozoa. And in fact, that was the only life form on the planet for nearly 2 billion years. For more than half of the evolution of life on the planet, that was it. Life was protozoa and bacteria, single-celled creatures. And then at some stage, they began to divide and cluster, and you get groups of cells, multicellular creatures began to form. That was the next stage of the evolutionary process. And at some stage, these became more and more complex, these forms, these clusters, these families of cells, until finally you got fish forms in the oceans developing about maybe 700 million years ago. And then at some stage, you got the amphibians, those who risked coming out of the water and trying their hand, or actually more precisely their legs, at being land animals. And they were going backwards and forwards. They were always born in the water and coming out onto the land. And then at some stage, real land animals developed, the reptiles, who were based on land and don't venture much into the water. And at some stage from that comes the mammals, the first creatures who could dream, who had a limbic system, who could have emotions, and who played with their young and raised their young. And at some stage we got the hominids evolving out of this. And then the hominids finally bring us into Homo erectus, a being that stood upright. And then at some stage, Homo sapiens, and then eventually Homo sapiens sapiens, creatures who could not only think, but they could think about thinking. In other words, they developed language and the ability to self-reflect. So that's what phylogeny looks like. That's the extraordinary evolutionary journey. Really, really, really elegant. So when we talk about then ontogeny recapitulating phylogeny, we're saying that every single one of us has reenacted that entire journey, that 3.7 billion year journey, we have reenacted it. Every one of us started out life as a single-celled creature, a zygote, the union of a sperm and an egg, a single cell. And then we divided and recombined into 2 and 4 and 8 and 16 pieces. And we recombined. We had the second stage, the little clusters of cells coming together. And then at some stage we began to differentiate further. At some stage, we were like fish. We lived in the amniotic fluid. Our world was a water world. And at some stage, we will become amphibians. At some stage, having been born, you can birth the child actually in water. You can birth the child in the water. It'll survive underwater. And then it'll come up at some stage and learn how to breathe. It'll come up onto land and become an amphibian. And at some stage, it'll be a reptile. And every single one of us has the vestiges of our reptilian past. Every one of us has a little coccyx, which is a vestigial tail, like the lizards did, or the great dinosaurs did. So we all have the remnants of that within us. And at some stage, every one of us is going to develop into Homo erectus. At some stage, at 8 or 9 months, the little child is going to pull himself upright, grab onto a chair, and start walking about. So we have Homo erectus developing at some stage. And within 2 years, they're all going to become Homo sapiens sapiens. They're all going to learn how to speak. So we recapitulate this extraordinary journey. And the reason I mention it is that because that's our starting place. If we want to know where we're going, we have to know, it's helpful to know where we've come from and where we are right now. Which brings me to my second point.